The delicate chime of crystal glasses congratulating the newly appointed public relations director had barely faded when a harsh, wheezing rasp tore its way out of my throat, shrill and broken. Like a kettle left too long on the fire dot, my name is Sailor Cole. I restore antique books for a living, a profession steeped in dust, quiet, and solitude, worlds away from opulence and rooms filled with polished laughter like this one. Did not belong among these tailored suits and strategically practiced smiles. My sister, Sloane, stood confidently on the small raised platform at the front of the VIP dining room, her flawless white teeth gleaming beneath the warm amber lights. She leaned into the microphone wearing that familiar PR perfect smile, polished, effortless, and utterly empty behind the eyes. "Well, here we go again," she said, her tone heavy with exaggerated fatigue. "Sailor, please don't make a scene. It's just mushroom soup. There's no crab. Or are you really planning to ruin my promotion dinner?" Uneasy laughter rippled across the room. Sloane assumed she'd landed another sharp joke, one more performance expertly calibrated for applause. She basked in the attention, soaking up the approval like oxygen. What she didn't notice was the man seated directly across from me, who hadn't laughed at all. Magnus Thorne, the group chairman. The architect of her promotion, was staring at my soup bowl in absolute horror, because Magnus Thorne's daughter also lives with a severe shellfish allergy. He knows anaphylaxis when he sees it. He recognizes the early signs of a closing airway. Before I could even understand what was happening, Magnus was already moving. He reached into the inner pocket of his impeccably tailored $5,000 suit, pulled out an EpiPen, and rushed toward me with a speed that seemed impossible for a 58-year-old man. But before that, before the collapse, before the panic, I need to rewind to understand how I ended up fighting for my life. You need to know what led up to that moment. The evening had been planned as an intimate dinner to celebrate Sloane's promotion, held in the VIP room of Etoile, a 3 Michelin-star restaurant where reservations required months of waiting and a credit card without limits. Soft golden lighting washed over everything, making the room feel like a luxury magazine spread come to life. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling. Dark wood paneling lined the walls. The air smelled like wealth, legacy, and ambition. I am 26 years old, and despite my youth, I've already built a solid reputation as an antique book conservator. In certain academic circles, I'm known as the surgeon of history for my clinical precision, unemotional logic, and deep understanding of preservation chemistry. I work with materials older than nations, handling them with the care most people reserve for live explosives. My hands have saved manuscripts that survived wars, floods, and fires. My work demands patience, silence, and reverence for fragile beauty. Sloane, by contrast, is 29 and freshly promoted to public relations director at Thorne Global, one of the largest multinational corporations in the country. She has glamorous designer clothes, flawless hair, and a smile she can flick on and off at will. Where I am careful and restrained, she is loud and impulsive. Where I preserve, she consumes daughter parents, Alistair and Cordelia Cole, both 60 and perpetually self-admiring, sat proudly at the table that night, glowing with reflected success. They loved to speak of Sloane's career, her visibility, her importance. Meanwhile, my work is dismissed as gloomy and insignificant, simply because they don't understand it. To them, I am the underachieving daughter who chose books over boardrooms, the tension that culminated in my poisoning. Yes, poisoning, because that's exactly what it was started before dinner was ever served. Earlier that evening, Sloane had been waiting in the restaurant lobby when Magnus Thorne arrived. She attempted to intercept him, eager to present a media report she'd prepared on Thorne Global's latest acquisition. She wanted validation, praise, recognition. Instead, Magnus noticed me near the coat check and his expression lit up with genuine curiosity. He walked straight past Sloane and spent nearly 20 minutes speaking with me about paper deacidification. He asked detailed questions, pH balance, alkalization treatments, European versus Asian paper fibers. He was captivated. He even mentioned a collection of 18th century letters recently acquired by his company and asked if I'd consider consulting on their preservation. Throughout that entire exchange, I watched my sister. I saw her jaw tighten. I saw her hands curl into fists. I saw the anger simmering behind her eyes. This was supposed to be her night, her spotlight. And yet here I was, the quiet younger sister with the boring job commanding the attention of the most powerful person in the room. Sloane's jealousy wasn't just petty. It was reckless. She wanted to humiliate me, to prove I was weak or worse, that my allergy was fake. A performance designed to manipulate sympathy. She convinced herself that a trace of crab wouldn't kill anyone. That maybe I'd itch. Maybe break out in hives. She wanted me embarrassed in front of Magnus, our parents, everyone who mattered. So she set her trap. I didn't see it happen, but witnesses later filled in the gaps. About 30 minutes before the soup course, Sloane excused herself and went to the kitchen. She found Chef Baston, renowned for his inventive French cuisine. Chef Baston, she said, turning on that dazzling PR smile, I have a special request. She praised his famous crab fat oil, the signature element in his bouillabaisse, rendered slowly from blue crab roe and fat. Infused with aromatics, it was liquid gold, amber-hued, rich, intensely flavorful. I was wondering, she continued, if on such an important night for me, you could add just a touch of that oil to the truffle mushroom soup. Something novel, unexpected. Chef Baston hesitated. Crab and truffle weren't traditional partners, but creativity was his craft. The umami of crab fat, the earthiness of truffle, it could work. For you, Miss Cole, he said with a polite bow, I'll prepare one special bowl. What he couldn't know, what he had no way of knowing, was that he'd just been recruited into a quiet conspiracy. He didn't know about my life-threatening shellfish allergy. He didn't know his artistry would become a weapon. When the soup arrived, it was stunning. The waiter placed each bowl carefully. Mine shimmered with reddish-brown oil swirls, glowing like molten copper in the candlelight. Sloane leaned toward me, her voice soft and affectionate. I asked him to add smoked chili oil and pine mushroom extract to yours. I know rich food overwhelms you sometimes. This should make it easier. I should have known better. Caution defines my life. My profession demands skepticism, verification, restraint. But the warmth of the room, my sister's enthusiasm, the intoxicating scent of truffle, it disarmed me. The mushroom aroma overwhelmed everything else. The crab oil looked identical to truffle oil. I suspected nothing. I lifted my spoon and took a single bite. It tasted incredible. Deep, savory, layered. For 5 fleeting seconds, I thought Sloane had done something kind. Then my throat slammed shut. The reaction was violent and immediate. My airway constricted as if an invisible fist had closed around my windpipe. My lips tingled, burned, and swelled. My tongue thickened, blocking air. Angry red hives exploded across my skin. I tried to stand. My legs failed. The room tipped sideways. I fell, hitting the carpet hard, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I could only claw at my throat, producing those inhuman wheezing sounds, and through it all, I heard my sister laughing. Not nervously, not regretfully, triumphantly. See? Sloane announced. She's eating mushrooms and pretending she's allergic to crab. Someone give Sailor Cole an Oscar. Some guests laughed uncertainly. Others shifted, uneasy. Come on, Sloane said, stepping closer as I writhed. Drop the act. You've got the attention you wanted? My vision tunneled. Darkness crept in. This is how it ends, I thought. Murdered by my sister while everyone thinks it's a joke. But Magnus Thorne was already beside me. He dropped to his knees, EpiPen in hand. Move, he barked. Call an ambulance now. Hold still, he told me calmly. I've got you. The needle pierced my thigh through fabric and skin. Epinephrine surged through my veins like ice. The pressure eased just enough. I dragged in one thin, whistling breath. Ambulance, Magnus shouted again. Call emergency services right now and get me oxygen if you have it, Magnus barked. The restaurant manager was already fumbling with his phone, nervously reciting the address to the dispatcher. A waiter sprinted toward the bar to retrieve the first aid kit. Magnus looked down at me, his expression grim but focused. Stay with me, he said firmly. The ambulance is on its way. You're going to survive this. As panic rippled through the room and controlled chaos erupted, I watched Sloane's expression shift. The smug satisfaction drained from her face. Her confident smile cracked, then faltered entirely. She stared at Magnus kneeling beside me, at the EpiPen clenched in his hand, at my lips swollen grotesquely beyond recognition. Reality was finally reaching her. Her little joke, her clever humiliation had spiraled far beyond what she'd imagined. I didn't think, she stammered. Taking a step backward, my mother rushed forward, her face bloodless. What happened? What's wrong with her? She's in anaphylactic shock, Magnus snapped. Someone put shellfish in her food. This is not a joke. Without epinephrine, she would have been dead within minutes. My father's gaze dropped to the soup bowl, then lifted slowly to Sloane. I saw understanding bloom on his face, followed immediately by dread. Sloane, he said quietly. What did you do? Nothing, she shot back too quickly. I just ordered mushroom soup. There wasn't supposed to be any crab. Before she could continue, Andy the waiter appeared beside her, visibly shaken. Miss Sloane, he said carefully, should I clear the table now? You told me earlier to be ready to clean everything up afterward. Not now, Sloane snapped. That was when the epinephrine fully surged through my system. My heart raced, my airway loosened marginally, and strength returned in sharp electric bursts. With that strength came clarity, cold, precise, unmistakable. I reached up and grabbed Magnus Thorne's wrist with shocking force, my fingers clamping around his expensive watch like steel. He looked down at me in surprise. I still couldn't speak, but I didn't need words. I pointed weakly toward the soup bowl, then clenched my hand into a fist, the universal signal to hold, preserve, don't touch. Magnus understood instantly. He might not be law enforcement, but he was a man who built empires by reading moments correctly. No one touches that soup, he thundered. Security seal this table. This is now a crime scene. The restaurant security team, previously hovering uncertainly, sprang into action. They formed a tight perimeter around the table, blocking all access. Mr. Thorne. Sloane laughed weakly, forcing confidence. Isn't that a bit extreme? This is just a misunderstanding. Nothing leaves this room, Magnus cut in, his voice glacial. Not the dishes, not the food, not a napkin. Everything stays exactly as it is until authorities arrive. My mother grabbed Sloane's arm, her grip desperate. Tell me you didn't do this on purpose, she whispered. Tell me it was an accident. Sloane opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her face had gone stark white. I lay there gripping Magnus' wrist, a grim satisfaction cutting through the terror. With my last bit of strength, I had preserved the evidence, the soup that nearly killed me, the proof of her intent. That was my first small victory before darkness crept in at the edges of my vision again. The last thing I remember before the paramedics arrived was Magnus leaning over me, his hand steady on my shoulder. You're a fighter, he said quietly. Good, you'll need that. The paramedics worked on me right there in the VIP room while Magnus issued commands like a general. Another dose of epinephrine, oxygen, vital signs. Blood pressure is dangerously low, one paramedic said. Oxygen saturation's in the 70s. We need immediate transport, another added. She needs A observation. Anaphylaxis can rebound. As they prepared the stretcher, Magnus turned to Sloane, his expression carved from stone. You said this was normal mushroom soup? He asked softly. Her hands trembled as she clasped them together. Yes, she said, voice cracking. It was just mushrooms. She always overreacts. It's probably a panic attack. A panic attack doesn't close your airway, Magnus replied flatly. And it doesn't require an EpiPen. Stop lying. That was when Chef Baston burst into the room, pale and distressed. Miss Sloane, he said urgently, the waiter told me what happened. I don't understand you requested the crab fat oil yourself. You asked me to add it to the truffle soup. A tense silence fell. You said it would be novel, Chef Baston continued, unaware he was condemning her with every word. Unexpected. I thought it was what you wanted. Andy stepped forward. And you directed me to place that bowl in front of Miss Saylor, he added quietly. You pointed to her seat. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. I lay on the stretcher, oxygen mask fogging with each shallow breath, watching my family's illusions shatter. My father's face had gone gray. My mother covered her mouth. Trembling Dot, they were staring at Sloane as if seeing her for the first time. This wasn't an accident, my father said hollowly. Tell me they're wrong. Sloane's eyes darted wildly. I just thought she's always dramatic. I thought a tiny bit would prove she was exaggerating. You thought poisoning her would teach her a lesson? Magnus snapped. It was supposed to be harmless. Sloane shrieked. This was my night. Enough, my father said sharply. The room fell silent. We need to go, a paramedic said. Now, as they wheeled me away, I met each of their eyes. My mother sobbing. My father aged a decade. Sloane terrified. Good, I thought. The deepest toxicity hides behind smiles and concern. When someone tests your survival and calls it a joke, they're telling you exactly who they are. I had spent 26 years being quiet, accommodating, and visible. That ended tonight, Dot, as the ambulance doors closed and the siren wailed. Something inside me hardened. Sloane had risked my life. My parents could no longer deny it. Emotional bonds snapped, clean and final. How are you feeling? The paramedic asked gently. I couldn't speak, but I gestured that I understood. I wasn't okay, but I was done. I would handle this like I handle damaged books, with ruthless precision, removing every contaminant until only clean truth remained. Sloane tried to destroy me. Instead, she freed me. Precision is far more dangerous than chaos. Outside, Magnus stood by the ambulance, phone in hand. I'm calling the police, he said. This is attempted murder. Sloane followed, heels frantic. Please, it was a mistake. You admitted intent, Magnus said coldly. You'll be arrested tonight. My mother sobbed. My father froze, and as I watched through the ambulance doors, I knew this story was no longer hers to control. Already texting their friends about the spectacle unfolding in front of them, I noticed the restaurant manager wringing his hands, sweat beading at his temples as he clearly envisioned the public relations disaster this night was about to become. And in that moment, I saw my opening dot despite lying on the stretcher with my throat still swollen and my voice reduced to a raw, shredded rasp. I raised my hand. With effort, I dragged the oxygen mask down from my face. Ma'am, please keep that on, the paramedic insisted, reaching to put it back. You need the oxygen? I pushed her hand away weakly, but with unmistakable intent. Wait, I croaked. The single word burned like broken glass sliding down my throat. Magnus turned toward me, surprise flickering across his face. The sidewalk fell silent as everyone strained to hear what I was trying to say. I met Magnus's gaze directly, my eyes clear despite everything my body had just endured. "Don't call the police." "Yet," I said, each word costing me more breath than the last. The paramedic glanced anxiously at my monitors. I continued anyway. "Arresting the PR director will cause Thorn Global's stock to plummet." I paused, sucking in a thin breath. "I don't want to affect your assets." I swallowed hard. "My lawyer will handle it tomorrow." The relief that swept across my family's faces was almost laughable. My mother let out a sob of gratitude. "Oh, Sailor, thank you. Thank you. You're such a good girl, such a good sister." My father's shoulders sagged. "We'll work this out as a family," he said quickly. "We'll sit down tomorrow and talk through everything calmly." And Sloan looked at me with a mix of relief and quiet contempt. I could read her expression perfectly. She thought I was weak. She thought I was afraid to push this further. She believed family loyalty would save her, Sailor. She said, stepping closer to the ambulance, her voice slipping into that soft, manipulative tone she used when she wanted something. "I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. But we're sisters. We're family. We can work through this. Therapy, maybe. Family counseling." I lifted my hand, stopping her. When I spoke again, my voice was barely more than a whisper, but it carried. "My lawyer will contact you with the terms." "Terms?" Sloan blinked, confused. "For the settlement," I clarified, fighting the urge to cough. "You're going to pay for what you did." "Every penny." Her face hardened. "You're going to sue me? Your own sister? Would you prefer prison?" I asked quietly. 8 years, state facility, or a civil settlement? "Your choice." Magnus watched me with something very close to approval. "Your lawyer should contact my office as well," he said. "Chef Baston and Andy will give full statements. Thorn Global will cooperate completely." "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," Magnus replied. "You saved yourself tonight. Preserving that evidence was smart. Most people wouldn't have thought that clearly." "I work with fragile things," I said as the paramedic replaced the oxygen mask. "I know how to protect them." "We really need to go now," the paramedic said firmly as the ambulance doors began to close. I took one last look at my family standing on the sidewalk. They thought I had shown mercy. They thought I had chosen family over justice. They thought I was still the quiet, accommodating sailor who swallowed pain to keep the peace. They were wrong. I needed time to build an airtight case, time to let them relax, time to gather every piece of evidence that would make what came next undeniable. Sloan thought working with a lawyer meant gentle negotiation, maybe a small payout, maybe an apology. She had no idea what was coming. I spent 3 days in the hospital. The anaphylaxis had done more damage than first assumed. My vocal cords were inflamed and injured, leaving my voice weak and hoarse. Weeks of speech therapy loomed ahead. Repeated epinephrine doses strained my heart, requiring monitoring. Psychologically, I was shattered nightmares of choking, panic triggered by food smells, terror every time I had to eat. But I didn't rest. I didn't waste time on self-pity. On the second day, still tethered to Ives, I met with my lawyer, Mr. Lewis. He was sharp, aggressive, mid-40s, specializing in civil litigation. I'd hired him years ago for a contract dispute, and he'd impressed me with ruthless efficiency. "Tell me everything," he said, tablet ready. I did. Magnus's conversation, Sloane's jealousy, the kitchen visit, the soup. The confession. "This is airtight," Mr. Lewis said, eyes gleaming. Confession, multiple witnesses. Physical evidence. A billionaire executive intervening. "I want affidavits," I whispered, "from the chef and the server. notarized, immediately, already in motion, and full medical documentation, everything. Already ordered? I looked at him steadily. I want her destroyed, not hurt, not embarrassed. Destroyed legally? Mr. Lewis smiled. That wasn't kind. How much? 900,000, I said instantly. Enough to ruin her, not enough to scare a mediator. You've planned this. I've had time, and I want mediation, I added. 3 weeks, no court. They'll agree, he said. They'll be terrified. Good, I replied. My silence isn't forgiveness, it's strategy. Over the next 2 weeks, he worked relentlessly. Affidavits, medical reports, expert testimony. The case became devastating. My family thought I was healing, processing, deciding whether to forgive. My mother sent flowers. I donated them. My father left voicemails about unity. Sloan sent one text. Can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding. I answered none of them. Silence isn't mercy. It's aim. On day 19, Mr. Lewis called. Mediation is set. Day 21. Perfect, I whispered. Let's end this. 3 weeks. That's how long it took my body to stabilize, my voice to return, and my case to become unbreakable. That's how long my family waited to sweep attempted murder under the rug. The mediation room smelled like lemon polish and desperation, neutral walls, corporate calm, and that was where everything finally came due. Beige walls, a long oak conference table, leather chairs that complained softly whenever someone shifted. The kind of room where 7-figure deals didn't explode, they suffocated. Where lives changed without raised voices or slammed doors. I arrived early with Mr. Lewis, my fingers still trembling faintly from the medication I'd be taking for the next 6 months. The doctors promised the tremors would fade with time. I wasn't sure I wanted them gone. They reminded me of what I had almost lost. Sloan entered 12 minutes late. Of course she did. Even now, she couldn't resist asserting control by making everyone wait. She wore a dove-gray dress that likely cost more than my rent. Her hair swept into a soft chignon engineered to project purity, innocence. Her makeup was flawless, just enough to look composed, not enough to appear cold. But it was her face that made my stomach tighten. That rehearsed remorse. Eyes widened just a fraction too much. Lips pressed together as if restraining unbearable pain. I'd grown up watching that expression. It was the face she used when she wanted something, when she needed belief, when she was about to lie so convincingly she almost believed herself. Mom and Dad flanked her like security detail. Dad's jaw was locked in that immovable way that meant his decision had already been made. Mom kept glancing at me, her eyes holding something unfamiliar fear, threaded with frantic hope. They looked at me the way people stare at ticking explosives. Sailor, Mom began, her voice slipping into that gentle, comforting tone she used when I scraped my knee as a kid. Honey, we're just so relieved you're feeling better. I said nothing. Mr. Lewis had been clear. Speak only when necessary. Let facts do the work. Don't let them reach you emotionally. I folded my hands on the table, felt the cold wood against my palms, and waited. Sloan leaned forward. Right on cue, her eyes shimmered. Sailor, her voice fractured perfectly, like porcelain cracking under pressure. I need you to know how deeply sorry I am. I swear, I thought you'd just get an itchy rash or maybe a scratchy throat. I was just teasing, trying to loosen you up. You've always been so serious. She reached for my hand. I pulled mine away. I didn't know, she continued, tears now spilling freely. Impressive control, really. I didn't know you'd almost die. If I had, I never would have done it. Stop. The word came out sharper than I intended. Sharp enough that everyone startled. Mom rushed in immediately, instinctively containing the damage. Sailor, please. Your sister made a mistake. A horrible mistake. but she never meant for it to go this far. She didn't think it would be this bad. Can't you just let it go? Let it go. As if Sloane hadn't watched me seize on a restaurant floor. As if she hadn't poured crab fat oil into my soup and waited, wine glass poised, to see the result. As if ignorance excused poisoning. Dad cleared his throat, summoning that authoritative tone that once made me fall in line. Sailor, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But at the end of the day, we're your only family. Family forgives. Family moves forward. Something inside me finally broke, but not the way they expected. I felt it snap clean in my chest, obligation, guilt, the childhood hope that one day they'd choose me. All of it fell away, weightless. My voice shook when I spoke, not from weakness, but from fury and grief and clarity, the kind you feel when you step out of a burning building and see open sky. No, Sloane's expression faltered. No, I don't want a family like this. I looked at each of them, Sloane with her designer victimhood, Mom with her enabling desperation, Dad with his entitlement. I will not let this go. The silence afterward was absolute. I could hear the wall clock ticking. Mr. Lewis chose that moment to open his briefcase. The snap of the lock sounded final, like a gavel. Miss Cole, he said, addressing Sloane with detached precision. No pet names. No softness. You are a public relations director. Your profession relies on understanding optics, narrative control, and perception. He slid a document across the table. You are intelligent enough to understand the difference between a prank and attempted manslaughter. Sloane went pale. That's not I didn't. We have sworn testimony from Chef Baston, confirming you specifically requested crab fat oil be added to your sister's soup. Testimony from Andy, the server, stating you personally ensured the dish was delivered to Miss Sailor Cole. Toxicology reports, confirming shellfish protein levels consistent with deliberate contamination. Another document. Then another. We have text messages sent 3 days prior asking which ingredients trigger severe reactions. Internet searches. How much shellfish causes an allergic reaction? Can crab oil be hidden in soup? Symptoms of anaphylaxis. Each piece landed heavy and undeniable. This was premeditated, Mr. Lewis said, which elevates the charge beyond reckless endangerment. The district attorney is prepared to pursue aggravated assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Given the planning involved, you face up to 8 years in state prison. My parents drained of color. Sloane shook her head wildly. No, I didn't mean. Alternatively, Mr. Lewis continued calmly, my client is willing to pursue civil settlement. Criminal charges will be withdrawn in exchange for compensation covering medical expenses, emotional distress, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. Dad swallowed. How much? Mr. Lewis looked at me. I gave a slight nod. $900,000. The number hovered like a blade. That's insane, Sloane gasped. I don't have that kind of money. You own a 2-bedroom unit in Riverside Heights valued at approximately $400,000. Mr. Lewis replied without glancing down. You possess jewelry, a vehicle, investment accounts. Your parents have equity in retirement funds? He leaned in. The alternative is prison, a permanent criminal record, and civil liability for decades. This settlement includes a non-disclosure agreement protecting your reputation. You keep your freedom. Mom covered her mouth. Dad stared at the table like it might rescue him. Sloane finally looked at me, truly looked. And in that moment, she understood. I wasn't the sister who shrank to make her shine. I was someone who nearly died and decided survival alone wasn't enough. You can't do this, she whispered. I can, I said evenly. And I am. My parents stared at me with something new, fear, and beneath it, resentment. The hatred reserved for someone who refuses their assigned role. I didn't care. 45 minutes later, after bargaining, tears, and desperation, the choice remained simple. 900,000 or 8 years. They signed. I watched Sloane's hand tremble as she wrote her name. Watched my parents sign as guarantors, trading their future for her freedom. When it was finished, Sloane looked at me hollowly. I'm your sister. No, I said, standing. You're someone who tried to kill me. I walked into the sunlight without looking back. The fallout came quickly. Sloane was quietly dismissed from her firm. The apartment sold at a loss. Jewelry consigned. Car returned. My parents liquidated everything. Payments cleared one by one. Months later, I heard about the engagement party, the borrowed dress, the old money fiance, the lies, the digging, the quiet eviction. Last I heard, Sloane worked 40 hours a week under fluorescent lights, reading scripts to strangers who hung up on her. A year after the night I nearly died, I stood in my library. My library. Coal conservation and restoration. Exposed brick, sunlight, shelves of preserved history. I built it all from this settlement. From survival. From refusal. When Mr. Lewis texted that the final payment cleared, I felt only calm. I turned back to my work. I preserved what mattered. I cut out what didn't, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged.